and it works in well coming along just after that is climate change and biodiversity loss. So our two big existential issues. Over 80% of New Zealanders are concerned about climate change, and I heard a recent survey that said that businesses are also getting on board. So can you talk to us about climate change, folks, for 90 seconds? We'll have some questions and then we'll go and have a cup of tea. Thank you. Who wants to go first, maybe?
New Zealand first believes in two things when it comes down to climate change. The first is a pragmatic approach to environmentalism and lowering our carbon emissions. If we go after and attack our biggest carbon emitters, such as industry, such as agriculture, we are gutting our economy and we won't be able to afford future environmental initiatives or even pay for things like decent public transport, like decent social housing for people, or even be able to pay students to continue to study. We will be going into debt, and you cannot go into debt forever. And so that means that we want to see support for farmers and industry to lower their carbon emissions through brand new technologies and incentives. When we were in government through the Provincial Growth Fund, we funded a lot of research in that space, whether it was the red seaweed kelp, which has been found to lower methane emissions in cows by a third, or even getting some industries that were emitting carbon to lower their carbon footprint. The next part is the climate resilience, because at the end of the day, we are a very small country in the world with a very small carbon footprint, and other countries are still going to be pumping out carbon. Some of them are going to be increasing their carbon footprint. So we need to ensure that our infrastructure is resilient and is able to quickly recover from climate change disasters, and that also means having a defence force that's able to go in and assist in the aftermath of a disaster, especially in the Pacific, where we have made big commitments.
Like I said before, we are in climate change crisis, and if anyone doubts that we are actually in trouble, and I think they need to reality check. Last October, I was just visited Africa, and East Africa to be specific, and I caught up with some of the United Nations people that were working on climate change. And what I have seen was extreme drought of 5 years actually exposed millions of people to this. No harvest, no livestock. And my way back reflecting that if this is not going to happen to us, we would be naive. 2 months later, we had floods in Auckland, and then the Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay. So climate change is serious. The Labour government is actually, I know that a lot of people really strongly feel about climate change, that enough not being done. Sometimes we have to take a hard balance, but actually the list of things that's been achieved in the Labour government is actually huge. But if you ask me, is enough? No, it's not enough. I'm a big believer that climate change is a serious threat. It's actually an existential threat, and we need to be doing more. We need to be investing more money. We need to give support our economies to be to decarbonize our economy, our infrastructure. But we need to be working with our farmers. We need to give them tools and technologies that they need, so that we can decarbonize the farming sector, because that is important. Climate change is serious, and it needs a serious investment and serious work.
So I think one of the most important things that I read in the most recent IPCC report is that it's not too late to prevent catastrophic climate change, and it is possible to not bring us to 1.5 Celsius of global warming, but we need the political will, and that's what we need to give more certainty around what the transition is going to look like. And we have to make sure that it's a just transition, and that those who have contributed the least to climate change are not paying the most for the transition to a low carbon world. So here in Wellington, as we've talked about, we've just talked about transport, so I won't go there, that's half of our emissions, but we need to move people into low carbon modes of transport: walking, cycling, buses, and light rail. The other thing though is housing and energy. That's a really important and big chunk of where our emissions come from as a city, and that's why the Green Party have put out our policy around a clean power payment scheme, and that's all about helping people to make sure that they've got clean energy. It helps people to afford solar power and to look at things like having heat pumps installed and really support people to be able to clean up their energy, because that's where a big chunk of our emissions are coming from, and we're getting the money to pay for that clean power payment from the revenue from the emissions trading scheme. We need to learn to live with more water. We need to look at water sensitive urban design. We need to look at having a resilient city. We had the most slips on record last year with more than 1,000 slips. So it's about preparing for climate change and reducing our emissions.
So National is 110% committed to net zero 2050, and we also support the ETS, and personally I really want to work on this. Now I'm going to say two things. One, IMF is saying very clearly we have absolutely no chance of building the renewable energy we need to electrify that 40% of energy and transport, which is the source of emissions. So National is saying we're going to turbocharge renewable energy generation development, because first of all we don't have the foreign capital in this country to do it, and we've actually changed our FDI rules to make it harder to bring money to do this. We know that some wind farms have taken 8 years to develop. We want to fast track that process, and New Zealand has enormous renewable energy potential, not only for our own needs but also for export. Now the second thing, methane emissions from cows, cow farts. Technology is available in Europe which would reduce those emissions by 30%. That technology is accepted for use in 45 countries in the world, but not in New Zealand. New Zealand's developing solutions in that area. We can't even test it here. We have to test it in the United States. We need to update our laws to be international best practice. Absolutely critical for reducing that. And the thing is, if we just cut those dairy herds or the other herds by 20%, we will cut our export dollars. We're already the worst in the developed world for our balance of trade deficit. That will only get worse. We have a GDP growth that's 156 of 157. If you want tax money to pay for services, cutting the dairy herd is going to reduce the money we have for public services.
Yeah, time after time, the environment comes off a poor second best to business interests, and we think in Workers Now that a significant step forward against the problems of climate change is to nationalise the electricity generating and the energy industries, take the profit motive out of it, and then we're going to be able to actually deal with the problem in a saner fashion.
Awesome. Brilliant.
As I said earlier on, when we started the party, industrial hemp was illegal. It's now legal. It's $1 billion industry, and if in fact you legalise cannabis for those over the age of 18, which is one of our remaining goals to be achieved, you would actually double it to an industry that's worth $2 billion, because people are only interested in the buds of cannabis. You're still going to have the detritus of it. You're going to have the roots. You're going to have the leaves. You're going to have the stalks, all of which can be used in to minimise the climate change. So you're going to find that legalising cannabis will in fact allow you to have five crops a year, as opposed to one crop which takes 30 years of trees, Pinus radiata trees. So by legalising cannabis, you'll contribute towards the climate change reversal.